Hello?
Yeah, just say your name and where you're from and stuff.
My name's Jacob Lewis. I'm from Tifton, blah, blah, blah.
So when you first started collecting, what were you into? What were you looking for?
Well, when I first started collecting, it was more about the content of the music, like as in what the music was, and less about what pressing of it what it was or what condition the record was in. I was never buying, doorstop copies, but I wasn't buying, specifically searching out, I need a near mint copy of this. I need this at least to be a VG plus for me to buy it. I need it to at least be this for something. I needed to be this pressing. I needed to be that pressing. It was more about, that this is David Bowie's Low. This is a great, art rock album. Brian Eno's on this. I like that. I like Brian Eno. And I can show you a few records that I bought back in the day. This was the first record I bought from Red Door, and it's very symbolic of the stuff I was buying at the time. This is Radioactivity by Kraftwerk. I think it is actually a first US pressing, and it's not in terrible shape. And here's another old classic. I really loved the college radio classics, like, Husker Du and Replacements and all that kind of stuff. Of course, that's a reissue of that one that I had forever ago. There's the David Bowie Low. I think this is a later 70s issue of that, but this is another one that I had from back then. I was a Frank Zappa head, and I still am. I think he's a wonderful composer, musician, thinker even. And then my Daydream Nation box set. That's another thing that I was into then. So as you can see, most of them aren't original issues necessarily, and most of them aren't even in great collector's shape from back then, but that's what started it, and that was what was important to me. And as I learned more about records, I decided more about what I liked, and I became very particular and snobby about my pressings and records and what I wanted to have.
Out of your collection, what would you say you have the most of as far as a particular artist or group?
Without a question, Frank Zappa. That's just what I have the most of. Everywhere from about roughly right here to about right here even is Zappa stuff. I would say I could fill about a whole cube of Frank Zappa stuff, and it's scattered throughout the house. As the years passed, the couple of years passed, I ended up getting most of the Frank Zappa studio albums, all the stuff. I've got all the original with the Mothers of Invention, and so it kind of started getting down to, I need to start getting bootlegs and the 80s stuff, which I found that I liked. Now this is a set that I wanted to hunt down because it was an official release of the Zappa bootleg stuff from the early 90s that Zappa had put out himself. This was actually, I bought this physically at El Guru Records in Atlanta, Georgia. And I got a great deal on it considering it's a pretty cool pop-out box set with the t-shirt and a scrapbook, button, and then it's got probably 8 records of Zappa bootleg live music.
So where do you actually find these records?
Well, my dad and I have always been a fan of like junk store culture, about thrifting, and we like to hit the road pretty regularly. I'd say that there's not a day where my dad's off of work that we don't hit the road and look for rare albums. We like to hit really weird places. We like junk stores. We like it for it to be, the Goodwills are fine, and we found incredible stuff in Goodwills and Salvation Armies, but sometimes It's about the place that wasn't on the map, that you couldn't see on your GPS, that you had to just ride by and stop and walk in, and you meet the weirdest people, and that's part of it too, because we enjoy the interaction with people in these stores. But the funnest thing is just getting your knees dirty. I mean, if you look at my jeans, they're just green from digging,
Yeah.
from
Put the work in.
from a couple of years of abuse of, digging through bins. But it pays off, and you find, irreplaceable private press stuff. You find, stuff by blues musicians that live down the door, that you didn't know about. You find stuff that you probably wouldn't even be able to afford or wouldn't want to shell out the money for it, but you got it for $1. Just probably a few months ago, I found this Icelandic progressive rock album by Trubrod, I think is the pronunciation of the group. People regularly pay, couple $100, $300 for this LP. It's in fairly good shape too, and they were pretty cool looking guys. I think this was their second album, and I think it was released in 1970, and it's a Denmark pressing. But I never would have thought to have listened to this group just because of the obscurity of the recording, but because we were digging through records, this is something that surfaced, and we paid $1 for this. Another recent gem I found, I started collecting 12-inch singles, and this is one by Sam Butler. It's a rare 12-inch soul single. It's a great song, actually. Of course, it's in pretty great shape. It was promotionally released. This is a promotional release. There was also a 7-inch of it, but people regularly pay a couple $100 for one song, which I find that fascinating. When music becomes so rare that somebody's willing to pay a lot of money just to have one song, which I would never pay a lot of money for one song, but I'll get it for cheap, and then I've got it anyway. I've got a lot of rare 12-inch singles, which I think I've got positioned over there somewhere. I'm a pretty big fan of, a lot of the 90s classics. I like Tortoise. This is a great record. Wouldn't find in a thrift store. I paid a little bit more for that. I love stuff like Yola Tango. This is actually the original issue, as was the Tortoise. I try to get originals, and when I can, I've made a point to. These are actually cool. A few months back, I decided I wanted to get all the original Swans, and I've started. There's their first EP and the original Filth LP, which is one of my favorites. This early Swans, I kind of like them in the order that they came out, and then Cop, which is a great album too. These, Swans were great. I'm a big fan. I actually haven't bought their newest album yet, but I'll do it soon. I'm also a pretty big fan of, the 20th century avant-garde, modern classical music. For example, this was a John Cage album. I actually found 2 copies of this, which was odd. I thrifted them probably a year back. But I think John Cage is great. Can't remember the label on this. I think this was on Everest, which is odd, because they do a lot of folk releases as well. But I really like experimental music, and I don't like it to be pretentious. It's something that I actually enjoy to listen to, and it doesn't necessarily have to be noisy and dissonant for me to like it. Some of my favorite 20th century classical albums are very melodic. My favorite composer is actually Steve Reich, which I was listening to him earlier today, so maybe his presence will be made known so I can show off one of his records. Another that was found in the Bainbridge Hall from the other day was this Arthur Jones Scorpio. It's on the French Actuel label, which I learned that if you see anything on this label, then you should get it, because it's, you know, relatively rare recordings of, you know, free jazz and, you know, Don Cherry and things like that. But I'd never heard of Arthur Jones, and I later found this was his only studio recording. And there's the label on it, BYG. But so I didn't know for sure that this was a rare record, but you know, then you look it up and you say, okay, holy shit, you know, we're digging through records and this is rare, and you know, then you get it for $2, and then you learn a lot about music, and then you've got a great recording to hear. Now the tragedy of hunting in the wild is oftentimes you'll see rare stuff and you'll get excited, and then you'll pull the record out and it looks like it's been played on a cheese grater, and then so you can't buy it because you want to have stuff that'll play well. And you know, I like to have near mint records when I can, but there's certain private crest recordings that are just so rare and obscure that condition becomes kind of aside from the point because of its homemade nature. Obviously, you would hope that maybe you can find something that you already know what it was, and you know it's cool, and you know you're getting a good deal, but sometimes that's not the case. My dad and I are old-fashioned in that we like to dig through records physically. We like to be in junk stores, and we like to find it on the cheap. It's about the thrill of the hunt, and that's great. But you can't know everything, and so we're old-fashioned in that we like to do it physically, but we're not in that we bring new technology into it. We'll have our phones with us, and we'll use Discogs or even Collector's Frenzy as a site that we enjoy to use, that we can pinpoint when these albums came out, what label they were released on, and we can get ideas of their value and what they are, and then we can decide from there if it's something that we need to shell out our money on or not. And we found great things like that. You know, sometimes you'll pick a record out. For example, this was a find in Bainbridge, a Pharoah Sanders LP. It also was found along with another on this rare, Strata East label. Stuff on this label is pretty desirable. Now, when I see the name Pharoah Sanders, I of course think, okay, great tenor saxophonist. This is probably a rare record. But I didn't anticipate that it was a $100 record. I later found that out. So sometimes you know, and sometimes you don't. Actually, I'm going to talk about this record, Love Forever Changes. Anybody that listens to 60s albums, they probably heard this record, and if they haven't, then they need to. It's great. This is actually the album that started the thrift craze, or what it started us to want to hunt in the wild for records, because not knowing too much about albums at that time, this was an album that I found. It's actually the original Tan label Elektra 1967 press, US press, and I didn't actually know who Love were at the time, but I quickly figured out, and then I started realizing, hey, there's crazy stuff just sitting on dusty shelves in thrift stores. So this is the one that started it all for me in finding rare albums in the wild. Here's another great record. Purchased this recently. This is Amandul 2, probably my favorite of the German krautrock groups. This is the original 1970 press on Liberty. It's a double album, and everybody should listen to this album, I think, if you like your mind to be blown, because it's blown mine. It blows mine every time I listen to it. I don't know if it has that effect on everybody, though. And right beside it, there's some dad rock. some replacements. My dad loved the replacements in the 80s, and there's an original Let It Be on Twin Tone Records. And I got this the other day recently from Red Door, not trying to advertise their store or anything, but it's the original, you know, the original hand stamped in black ink first press of Stink, their 1982 sleaze punk loser high school dropout album, and it's really great. And I think there were 1,500 to 2,000 of these originally that were hand stamped like this with the black ink, and I can't remember if it's 1,500 or 2,000, but it's a pretty scarce album, and I was very pleased to find it.